Economic experts at Goldman Sachs estimate that by 2027, the creator economy, fueled by social media, will be worth around $500 billion. According to Forbes magazine, the top 50 influencers combined will earn almost $720 million in 2026. Not only is influencing big business, but true to their title, these media personalities use their millions of followers on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook to impact our daily lives. Marketers estimate that for every $1 spent on creator campaigns, revenue is increased by nearly $6. And more than half of all consumers use social media as their primary tool when researching new purchases. While the power of social media makes the rise of influencers seem like a new phenomenon, influencers, people who change the attitudes, behaviors, and decisions of those around them, have existed for a very long time. There's Alan Turing, whose binary number system paved the way for modern computers. Where would our modern influencers be without their computers and their smartphones? Further back in time, we have Kai Lun, who invented paper, and Johannes Gutenberg, who invented the printing press. Together, they made the printed world accessible to the world. Every book, pamphlet, magazine, and eventually computer screen can be traced back to these two men. Of course, there are influencers in the Bible as well. Jesus certainly influenced the attitudes, behaviors, and decisions of millions of people around the world. Today, we begin a series on an Old Testament influencer, Esther. By the end of the book of Esther, she swayed one of the most powerful kings in the ancient world and saved the Jewish people from genocide. However, she did not start out trying to influence anyone. When we meet Esther in chapter 2 of the book which bears her name, she is trying very hard to blend in with the people and culture around her. In verse 10, we learn that at the insistence of her cousin Mordecai, she is deliberately hiding her Jewish heritage. Even the names Mordecai and Esther were designed to hide who they truly were. The name Mordecai is a derivative of the Babylonian god Marduk, and Esther, whose real name is Hadassah, is a Persian name meaning star. Moreover, Esther was living at the king's palace, undergoing beauty treatments and eating special food. This would certainly mean that she had to ignore Jewish dietary laws. There was no avoiding the rich, forbidden delicacies of a king's table, and refusing to eat these foods would have raised the suspicion of everyone around her. Perhaps Esther's greatest compromise was being part of a foreign king's harem, the sexual nature of which is quite clear. Esther had to go to the king at night and please him. Having successfully pleased this Gentile king, Esther is made his queen. Intermarriage between Gentiles and Jews is a direct violation of Jewish law. And one of the reasons why Esther and her fellow Jews in this story were living in exile in Persia under the rule of King Ahasuerus. While revealing her true identity would have certainly endangered Esther, we know that the compromises which she made are a stark contrast to other biblical characters. For instance, Daniel refused to eat forbidden food and even braved a lion's den to maintain his Jewish identity. And Nehemiah, he pleaded with the Persian king to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. Esther chose compromise and fitting in over standing apart from the pagan culture that surrounded her. While we might venerate those who stand up and stand out, we understand Esther and the choices she made. We regularly make compromises, both large and small. For instance, I know that an estimated 60% of the world's chocolate is produced using child and or slave labor. I know that by purchasing more expensive fair trade chocolate, there's a greater likelihood that I'm not supporting companies and products that use slave labor. But I usually purchase the least expensive option anyway. We know that our money speaks and our purchasing habits have real impact, yet few of us actually do the research and spend accordingly. Moreover, the costs of not compromising go far deeper than just our pocketbook. Many of us have experienced the real social isolation, which can result when the people with whom we work know or suspect that we are Christ followers. Will we choose to be honest, even if a lie is more popular or convenient? Perhaps every believer can understand the mental calculation of Esther and Mordecai. For Esther to admit her Jewish identity would, in the very least, mean exclusion from the king's harem, but could have meant banishment and even death. Playing along, fitting in, and denying that heritage would open the riches of the king's palace and might even put a crown on her head. The bad news is that God takes compromise seriously. Joshua laid it out for the Israelites when they entered the promised land. They could either follow false gods or live as separate people who followed the laws that Moses had given them in the wilderness. Joshua says, "But if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, then choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve, whether the gods your forefathers served beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you are living. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord." Jesus also warned his disciples against compromise, even if it meant personal ease or worldly gain. Then he called the crowd to him along with his disciples and said, "If anyone would come after me, they must deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me. For whoever wants to save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for me and for the gospel will save it. What good is it for a man to gain the whole world, yet forfeit his soul?" Paul wrote to the early Christians in Rome and urged them to live in a way counter to the culture that surrounded them. Do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. Even Peter describes followers as strangers and aliens in 1 Peter 2:11. Compromise dilutes our witness and imperils our very souls. Believers cannot be said to truly believe if they continue to act counter to those beliefs. The good news is that despite Esther's compromise, God still chose to use her. God might not be mentioned explicitly in the book of Esther, but make no mistake, even as the characters seem to act in ways that ignore God's authority and existence, God is still operating. God is still in control. And God worked powerfully through the circumstances in Esther's life. Even if you and I have compromised in ways big and small, God is not done with us. God is not giving up on us. God still wants to use us and to see his will accomplished, not just in our personal lives, but in his world. According to the Theology of Work Bible commentary, past hypocrisy is no excuse for failing to heed what God needs from you now. Prior misuse of your God-given abilities is no reason to believe you cannot employ them for God's purpose today. Esther is a model for all of us who have fallen short of the glory of God. You can't say, "If you knew how many ethical shortcomings I made to get here, I can't be of any use to God now." Just as God worked powerfully in the life of Esther, God can work powerfully in our lives. No matter what compromises we might have made in our past, today is the day to step out of our comfort zone and into God's great adventure. God can and will use us to influence his world. We only need to make ourselves available.